Hey, we got 23 people, almost half the class. I don't know why people aren't coming, but that's okay. The losers stayed home, as far as I'm concerned. What is this? Aha, okay. All right. Stefan McCain, thanks for coming again. So you were here 2:30. I always appreciate that. How am I doing? I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm still in Pennsylvania, cleaning up my dad's house with my sister, drinking too much, but that's the way it goes. And Sean Reeser showed life is good. Thanks for asking, Megan. I appreciate it. Strider. Sean Reeser sliding under the finish line. What do we got? 29. Just wait a couple more minutes because I don't have a whole lot to talk about today. Today, I just want to do a little review, especially of chapter 6, because I didn't present it to you. So I think I'm just going to go quickly through my PowerPoint for chapter 6 and then open the floor for questions because the exam is going to be on Wednesday. Ding dong, number 30 came. Asan Akudunlu. I'm glad to hear that your country is no longer at war.
Yeah, but actually it is.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. So like they decided on ceasefire on Friday, if I'm not mistaken, and then the other country attacked to second largest city again.
Hmm.
So like they got mad again.
Ugh. Are you pretty far away from there?
Yeah, but they have been bombing Baku too. Like they have sent 2 bombs, but they kind of prevented it on the air.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, I'm kind of safe now. No worries. They can prevent it because it's far
Yeah,
from
yeah.
the war place, but yeah.
Uh-huh.
And we don't have internet at all. I'm kind of joining illegally. I
Yeah.
don't want
Oh,
to
really?
VPN. It shows that I'm in London.
Okay. Yeah.
So like yeah, I'm joining in that
Fun.
way.
Yeah, yeah. Well, if you need any help, let me know, okay? We can give
Yeah,
you
thanks.
instructions or whatever.
It's fine for now. Like I'm safe in here. We're just not allowed to go outside after 9 p.m.
Okay.
Um, that's it.
Well, I'm usually in bed by 9, so that wouldn't mean anything to me. Just kidding. Uh, oh well. All right, what do we got? 31. I think that's probably going to be about it, just from what I've seen recently. So let's go ahead. I'm going to share my PowerPoint. There it is. Okay, for a buck. Does anyone know what these yellow areas represent? Anyone? For a buck. I'm not going to pay you the buck, so just to make me feel better. Who knows what these yellow nodes represent? So this is a brain. Oops, oops, oops. This is a brain. This is the diffusion tensor imaging of the brain. Is it that nobody knows or no one wants to talk? All right, I'm going to have to start annoying people. Abducibor. Oops. What do these yellow areas represent? Which type of thinking?
Are these specific areas on the brain?
These areas of the brain work together in which cognitive network?
Ooh.
There's only two. So it's either task positive or default mode. Which is it?
Oh, I think this is default mode.
Right, default mode. And why do you say that?
Because there's the front one. I remember the name from the quiz, but
medial prefrontal cortex. So it's in the middle of the prefrontal cortex.
Okay.
And then there's your precuneus here and your lateral parietal network, right? So all these three work together.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that's all I want to say here. So we're talking about our three different networks. You've got your default mode, which is kind of your rest and relax, monkey mind, ideas coming from everywhere and just kind of flowing with your thoughts. And then task positive, when you're actually working hard on something, really focusing on it. That's your task positive. And then the salience network brings in the sensory input and decides which way you're going to go, into default mode, relax, there's nothing to worry about, or task positive, we're working on something. So salience network then determines which way you're going to go. And then I talk a little bit about methods of recording. And this whole figure here just kind of, it's not that important really. It's basically physics. If you've got a current going in this direction, then you've got a magnetic field going in the other direction. And that's why if you have, wires and you push a magnet in and out of it, you'll get a current in that wire, an alternating current, and vice versa. So you've got a current here that produces magnetism, and you put an electrode up here, and the magnets then affect the electrodes on your scalp, and then that gets measured. So that's how it's happening. Not that important. It's just some physics I wanted to show off about. Okay, but here is what is important. Methods, the EEG. You've probably seen this before quite a bit. Basically just putting those electrodes in different parts on the brain, and you can measure things that are going across the top of the brain, and that's about it. So you're only measuring what's going on in the cortex. And here's what it looks. And as you can see, if you look really close, you can see the guy's thinking, I'm hungry now, I want to go to bed, right? You can read that like right about here. Okay, Dr. Slish, stop with your stupid jokes already. So you really have to know what you're doing to be able to read these things. I've got no idea what it is, except for this, which to me looks like a heart rate. I don't know. But anyway, that's what your EEG looks like. So you're kind of getting a sense of what's going on in the whatchamacall, cortex. MEG is a little more, you can see it's a much more expensive operation. You've got this huge instrument here, and you can go down into the grooves and things, so you get a little more information from this. And the nice thing about these two, most important to think about with these two is it's practically immediate. You can see exactly what's going on when it's going on, because that electrical connection is so fast. Okay, so that's the most important thing. It's like the fastest record time, but the least amount of information, because you can only see what's going on in the cortex. Here is an old style 3D thing. This is positron emission tomography. So basically you inject a dye or some kind of radioactive something, and then it goes through the bloodstream to the brain, and they can measure where it is in your brain. And the whole idea here is if you want to see what the most active parts of your brain are when you're doing specific things, you give like glucose, and the radioactive glucose will be taken up by the cells that are most active because they've used the most energy, or water, just radioactive water, so you can see where the blood flow is greater. And those greater blood flows are metabolically more active, and therefore you can see what parts of the brain are busy when you're doing specific things. So this is how they figured out the task positive mode and the default mode, because they would see what parts of the brain are busy during task and versus not busy during default mode. And so here you're getting a three-dimensional, I think I just had a thing. Here you're getting a three-dimensional image, which is really nice. The downside to this is there's a long lag period, probably like a second or two. So you're not seeing what's happening exactly when it happens, but you get this nice three-dimensional image, which the other one you're only getting surface stuff. Is PET harmful? I don't think so. I think typically they're going to use something like, probably not I think it is radioactive, but still, probably a low enough dose that it's not dangerous or something. I'm not sure. I don't think it's something you want to do every day, but it's not so dangerous that you're going to be in danger just doing it once or twice or something. Okay. Oh, another one. Checked. Do you know when they first started using it? I think this started, I remember in the 80s when I was in grad school reading about it. So it's always earlier than you think. If I was reading about it in the 80s, it probably started in the 70s. Okay. Okay, fMRI. Now, fMRI now is kind of the standard if you want 3D information, because this is MRI, which is magnetic resonance. It's just like when you take organic chemistry, they'll talk about NMR, right? Well, it's the same technique, basically. They leave out the nuclear because nuclear scares people, but it's basically the same thing. So here, what they're doing is watching, again, blood flow. They're basically looking at water. So where the blood flow is most, that means that's the most active area during whatever they're doing. So again, there's a time lag because first the area gets active and then it puts out little chemicals that say, I need more blood flow. And then the blood flow increases that area. So there's a bit of a time lag between the activity and when you measure it. But you get these beautiful 3D images. I mean, look at this. You can see everything. And, just like the MRIs you see from any part of the body, they can take slices through and just construct a three-dimensional image of what they're looking at. So it's really good functionally. And then this is diffusion tensor imaging. Basically, they're watching water molecules go up and down axons. So this is really good for figuring out what neurons are connected to what. So you can see the connection from the prefrontal cortex back to where it's connecting. And that's what we saw in that first picture. It's not functional at all. So you're not getting any kind of functional information now. You're just able to see what's connected to what in the brain. And you come up with these beautiful images. I mean, they're so cool. Do I have some more here? There, look at this. So these are neurons in like the cortex, and you can see the axons coming down and then connecting to other parts of the brain. And there's a stepping back further. All the kind of dots are cell bodies, and then all the stripes are axons or dendrites. So gorgeous images. And again, it's just structural. It's not functional. Okay, so when we're talking about the brain, you have to know what you're talking about with dorsal and ventral. So dorsal, if you think dorsal fin in a fish, oh wait, just check. First human volunteers for PET, August 76. Watch me bullshit my way to the right answer. I know it was in the 70s. Thanks for looking that up, Matt. Okay, so dorsal, you think dorsal fin, if you look at a fish, that fin that comes up in the back is the dorsal fin. So back is dorsal. And you can imagine because we're upright walking people, our heads are this way, but you can imagine any other animal, their head would come straight out from their spine. So this is your dorsal up here, and the opposite is ventral underneath. And then you got left and right, and posterior versus anterior. Posterior is called caudal, like the tail, posterior, and anterior is called rostral. That's a word I never remember, rostral. So I always say anterior versus posterior. And then looking from the top, medial versus lateral. So we talk about medial prefrontal cortex is in the middle. Okay, task positive network. Here's your main nodes of the task positive network. So your PPC, posterior parietal cortex, is like the memory storage area. And the dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex is the computation area. So when you're on task positive, this area of your brain is really hot because this is where you're doing all your confirmation or calculations, and it's communicating with knowledge you have that's been stored back here. So when we were talking about the limbic system and the hippocampus is your short-term memory. And then that memory gets stored back in your parietal cortex. So this is where those short-term memories get put into long-term storage back here. And by the way, if you wonder why old people can't remember anything, it's because our hard disks are full. I've got so much crap in my head right now. I could quote you so many Kiss lyrics that you would be very disgusted with me, but I won't. Okay. Dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. Okay, so that's this. This is working memory, decision making, planning, inhibition. I don't think inhibition belongs there. I think that should come out. Abstract reasoning is here. Receives stimulus info from the PPC, decides on movement, executes decisions. Okay, so when you're task positive, that's where your main thinking is. Posterior parietal cortex then is long-term memory, especially spatial and movement. Receives sensory info, orients a person in space. Orients you in space. Space, final frontier. Function. So function of task positive network then is completing a task, right? Memory of events, foresight, planning, execution. Memory of events coordinates with sensory info in working memory, executing a plan and deciding on movement. Cognitive flexibility. They say the sign of intelligence is being able to have two opposing ideas in your head at the same time without losing track of what you're doing. So holding two different ideas in your head, working with them, comparing and contrasting, solving problems, that's cognitive flexibility. And you'll be making or not making decisions on moral and risk-taking behavior. Okay, this is what we call entering the flow state. Focused attention on a task. So flow state meaning you're really focused here, you're not thinking about yourself, and all external stuff is not important anymore. I mean, like this morning, I was writing notes for my cardiovascular pharmacology class yesterday, and I looked up and I missed a Zoom meeting by 20 minutes because I was so focused on what I was doing. I forgot I had a Zoom meeting. I didn't know what time it was, blew right past it. And I do that all the time. I apologize ahead of time because I'll do it to you one day. So that's your flow state. Attention is focused on incoming stimuli, responding to it, peripheral thoughts are suppressed. Okay. Default mode. This is your lazy brain. Task positive mode takes a lot of energy. You know, if you've been studying really hard for 4 or 5 hours, you feel tired because it takes a lot of energy. Default mode is a more relaxed way of thinking and doesn't require as much energy. So here, like that very first picture we saw, it's your medial prefrontal cortex, which is right behind your eyes, probably from down here up to here. So because they split it between a dorsal and ventral medial prefrontal cortex, but I don't make the distinction because I don't want to make you memorize another thing. But medial prefrontal cortex, posterior cingulate cortex, which is posterior cingulate cortex, and the precuneus are here. Oh no, I'm sorry. Precuneus and lateral cortex. Okay, I may be wrong here, so I'm not going to test you on it, but I think that precuneus is here along with, oh no, wait. I'm sorry. Posterior cingulate cortex. Duh. I can't get it here. I don't have the picture here. Oh wait, there it is. Posterior cingulate cortex. So if you remember when we talked about the limbic system, this was always there. It's not really part of the limbic system, but you've got two different parts to this cingulate cortex. So this cingulate cortex is basically the bridge between the younger brain, the limbic system brain, and the older brain, the cortex. So it's in between, and it does the job of communicating between your limbic system and your cortex. And we've got two different parts of it. One part over here, anterior cingulate cortex, is part of the salience network that we'll talk about shortly. But here in default mode, we're looking at the back end of it, posterior cingulate cortex. And this is what's taking those memories from the hippocampus and putting them up into your posterior, or your parietal cortex. So this is making that decision, you know, based on your amygdala. What's the emotional significance you put on any particular memory? If it's really important, then your PCC will take it, put it up in parietal cortex. And if it's not important, then it'll get erased from your hippocampus. So that's your posterior cingulate cortex. And then on top of that actually is where the precuneus is. So the cingulate cortex, we're looking from the top here. The precuneus is down in, the posterior cingulate cortex is down in deeper. Precuneus is kind of on top of it. That's why it all lights up in the same spot. And then here you've got your lateral posterior cortex. So remember back in default mode, this was your posterior parietal cortex here. Not default mode, I'm sorry, task positive. So task positive is here, a little more medial. And now laterally over here is your posterior cortex, and that's going to be part of default mode. So you're taking memories in general and memories of yourself, which is your precuneus, and sending them up to your default mode so you can sit there and just talk about yourself. Kind of true. And this is how you develop your personality, really. You're between the memories, your current experience and your memories of who you are and where you came from and all the experience you've had in your life. That's what develops your personality, all of that stuff. So I'm going to skip over this. You can read it later if you want, but I want to leave time for questions later. So this is just talking about what each of the different things do. And you, like I say, you can read that. What does default mode? Introspective part of consciousness. Establish your self-awareness, self-consciousness, development of personality. So we'll see when we get into psychedelics, how psychedelics will cut that connection between your medial prefrontal cortex and all your memories. And this is how you get this depersonalization state. You don't know who you are. You can't see yourself as separate from the environment. You're just part of this oneness of the world. So we'll talk about that later. But also theory of mind. Theory of mind is like, you have your own thoughts and you think things that you don't tell other people. You keep that to yourself. And theory of mind is, oh, look, that person has the same thing I do. That person over there is also thinking to themselves and have their own mind too. So that's something that, lesser animals, I don't know, we're all animals. Less cognitively developed animals don't have that. So like a rat doesn't have theory of mind. Some of your higher primates do. I'm not sure if a dog does or not, but we still love them. Okay. Oops. And that orients to yourself in social contexts, right? So, puts you into the context of all your personal orientations. I don't know what I'm saying. Orients the self in a time and a place. So that's really important too. So when it comes to time, it's all default mode. So when you're bored and you're sitting around in default mode, you're watching time pass and it's passing really slowly because you're paying attention to it. When you're in a task positive mode, you shut off your time sense and you really focus on a task and you lose sense of time. So that's really important. And we'll talk about that again. All this is setting up that this chapter is setting up psychedelics and cannabis, right? Because those are drugs that affect cognition. The last chapter was talking about addiction. So that'll be when we talk about alcohol, opiates, and stimulants. So these two chapters kind of separate out that way in terms of the second half of the class. So what are you doing? Mind wandering, they always call it monkey mind. Your mind's jumping from one thought to another. It's also a creative way of thinking too. Creativity depends on default mode a lot. Salience network. So salience network, part of it is the insula. So the insula is part of the cortex, but it's underneath this cortex. So, like I said, the expansion of the cortex, when you go from, mammals to primates to humans, that cortex expands a lot. And here you can see it's kind of folded over other parts of the cortex. And if you pull that apart, which I suggest you don't do on yourself, but let's say you had a dead person and you could take the brain out, then you could pull it apart and the insula would be underneath there. So here is your insula, here. So you have to open up this crack here, the sulci, to get into that insula. So that's part of it. And the other part is the anterior part of your cingulate cortex. We were just talking about the posterior part, which isn't in this drawing, but just the anterior part. So the insula then is working with the ACC, and this is what's determining which way you need to go. So basically, your ACC is the decision-making center of this thing. It's not like your personal decisions, what you're thinking about, because this is all automatic. But this is like information comes in through your sensory areas to your ACC, and your ACC then checks with your insula to see if this is normal. Everything's okay. Is that all right? If everything's okay, you stay in default mode. And if it checks in like, oh, I'm driving at 70 miles an hour. That's cool. And you look up, oh yeah, there's a cliff coming. Is it okay that there's a cliff coming? Insula says, God, no, stop. And then you go, oh, okay, test positive. Stop your car. So that's kind of the way it works. It's like error checking. The ACC is checking in errors between sensory information coming in and your memories of what sensory information should be coming in if things are normal. And if things are not normal, then it sends you off in a different direction. See, there's your anterior cingulate cortex. I told you. Okay. It's weird doing Zoom lectures because I feel like I'm just shouting into the void. I'm sitting here in my bedroom, just talking. Okay. Sean Reeser, are all brains lopsided like this one? Like, is there a specific reason that one side of the brain would have more folds than the other? Oh, Jesus, that's a good question. So, Sean, do you mean left versus right, or what do you mean by lopsided? Left versus right. It should be the same left versus right. This is a figure I drew, and I drew it from, like I took a picture from the internet and redrew it and then colored it my way. I'm not really sure that much about neuroanatomy, whether it is very different left from right, isn't it? I'm not sure if that's normal, if everyone's a little different or everyone's exactly like this. Yeah, I don't know. Sorry. You got me, Sean. That's going to cost you 3 bonus points, though. Never call your professor out. Cingulate cortex. Okay, so what is this thing doing? Oops. Insula, strong connection to the limbic system and sensory stimuli, coordinates inputs to determine the emotional state. Important for empathy, changing one's emotional state based on perception of another's. Okay, here's something I can throw out to the crowd. What kind of people don't have this empathy? Anyone? For 300 bonus points, what kinds of people would have difficulty with this?
Irish.
Someone say Irish Catholics?
People.
Did someone say Irish Catholics? Just kidding. Psychopaths, sociopaths?
Yeah, I did.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, Irishmen sometimes struggle with that. No, but narcissists, right? Narcissists, but sociopaths, psychopaths, but also like people who are autistic, right? They have a hard time. They see a face and they don't know, does that face mean happy? Does it mean sad? They have a really hard time gauging other people's emotions. So they have a hard time fitting in with people because they don't know how to approach people. So that can be a real problem. If you're interested in autism at all, there's a really great series on Netflix called Atypical. It's about this very high functioning autistic guy who's in a senior high school in the first season. By the 3rd season, he's going to college. It's a really good show, and it really helps you understand what it's like to be autistic. Anterior cingulate cortex, error checking, looks at current incoming stimuli, compares current emotional state, connection with insula, shifts cognition depending on comparison. Okay, so that's your error checking. Okay, so this isn't anatomical. This is kind of a functional thing I came up with to help myself understand this. So information comes in through your insula, And communication between the insula and the ACC determines whether your current emotional state is right, everything's okay, or something needs to change. And then based on that, it will say, do we go into default mode where we're just kind of thinking thoughts that are coming from different areas like this, or do we go into task positive mode and now we're solving a problem? Task positive mode, by the way, is really, really fast, very fast thinking. There's a book by Daniel Kahneman, a Nobel Prize winner, called Thinking Fast and Slow. And it talks about how this network is really, really fast, and this is a more slow, deliberate way of thinking. Okay, the integration then is seamless between task positive and default mode. The Salins network decides based on internal cues, activates necessary pathways. And there was a question in the question thing this week about this anti-correlation. So you want to think about it like you can only have so much attention in your brain, right? And your Salins node is kind of deciding which way it's going to be. If it's task positive, the default mode will go down. If it's default mode, task positive will go down. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It could be in the middle, but they're anti-correlative. You can't be fully task and fully default at the same time. And that's important. It's important to dampen your default mode thoughts when you're in task positive, or else you're just getting distracted and it just makes it really hard to get anything done. State, and that's why here, interrupted by needs. So your needs are, this stuff is all default mode stuff, emotion and stuff is, well, emotion's coming from your limbic system, but default mode is bringing you out of task positive mode when you're getting distracted. Oops. Okay, so your networks then, not necessarily all or nothing, rapidly switching back and forth. Creativity then is kind of like a mix of the two, because you're thinking about things and getting ideas, and then you're acting on them and writing something or making something or something like that. Oops. Cognitive disorders, so depression. Is there, oh, let's watch this. Let's see if we can watch this. Okay, Isun, can you bring your video up real quick? All right, I'm going to hit this link. Tell me yes if you can see it. Tell me no if I have to do a different share, okay?
Okay.
Or you can just say yes or no, I guess. Can you see this?
Not yet.
No?
It's
Okay.
moving.
All right, I'll do it. I need to reshare, I think. Okay. So this comedian, I think he's hilarious. I don't know if you know him, but he's talking about his own depression and what it's like to be seriously depressed. And he's making it funny, but
Professor, I can't hear nothing. It's low.
Can't hear it. I'm not sure how to make it.
You gotta put it up more. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay, do this. Okay.
Maybe we can also open captions.
CC? There we go. How's that?
It's, it was really weird. Yes, I'm very grateful and very happy for what is going on, but at the same time, I still have that weird depression, and now it's not even about anything specific. It's almost like the depression is just this friend that I have to hang out with every now and then. And like, here's how weird it is now. The other day, I was in the supermarket near where I live. I'm in the frozen food aisle, and I'm looking at this shelf of lean cuisines. I'm just looking at all these lean cuisines. I'm not thinking of anything. And then out of nowhere on the South Toto's Africa started playing. I saw Africa, and I don't know what it was, one's really sad. I ended up buying Linguine first. I saw one that I wanted, which is the Thai peanut noodles one. But I took it out, and I look at the back instructions, and it says, cut a slit in the top, put it in the microwave for 2.5 minutes, then remove, and then open the plastic and stir it. And when I saw it, I went, I don't have time for that. I bought the macaroni and beef one, which is you just put the top and that's it. The second step made me go, I'm not Emerald here. I'm not like, just want to put it once in 3 minutes and that's it. Like that's how, for some reason, that's so impressive.
All right, so I think what I want you to get out of that is like what it's like to be depressed. It's like, oh, hang on. Sure. What it's like to be depressed. It's like, oh, I just can't do this. It's just anything task related. I just, put it off. I'll do it tomorrow. I'll do it next week. That's what depression is. You can't work up the energy to actually, you just want to sit and think about yourself all the time and how shitty you feel. You get caught in this loop of, oh, I feel like crap. This is why I feel like crap. This happened to me. This person over here, they hate me. Nobody likes me. You get caught in this depression loop. And it's pretty horrible. And he makes a joke out of it, but I mean, it's pretty sad. He, by the way, his wife was killed or died or was killed. I think she died. But anyway, that's what sparked his depression. But anyway, here's what I'm trying to say. You've got a weakened ACC, so it's not able to get you into that task positive mode. Its ability to get you into task positive has been weakened. And so usually you've got this anti-correlation, and now you just can't get out of default mode. And so basically, and what else is strengthened is the connection between your emotions to your ACC to your default mode. So now you're just thinking about your emotions. I feel crappy. Emotional rumination, negative self-referential thoughts. Oops. And you also have a weakened intra-network connectivity in the default mode, which means between the front part of your default mode, your actual thinking, where your thoughts are, and the back part where your memories of yourself are. So you're disconnected from the part of your brain that would remind you, hey, I'm not that bad a guy. I'm not so bad. My life isn't so bad. Everything's okay. So you lose that connection. So now you're just caught in this loop between your emotions and your default mode, and you can't get anything done. So that's kind of what depression is all about. And when we get into psychedelics, we'll talk about how psychedelics now are potentially being used to help that. So here's your normal thought patterns. Everything's in balance. Here in depression, you can see this is really strengthened, right? Information's coming in from your amygdala, your emotional centers, and it's going to your MPC, and this is all you're doing. It's just emotional thoughts. And you're disconnected from the part of you that would remind you who you really are. And you're caught in this negative image of yourself. Okay. All right. Autism spectrum disorders. Now, it's a spectrum, right? So there's a lot of different types of autism, and there's a lot of different degrees of autism. So what I've done here is really kind of a simplification of what it really is, an oversimplification. But just to give you an idea how cognition can change between different people and cause problems. So some of the symptoms and deficiencies of autistic people are the social development and interactions, inability to sense other people's emotions. That's what I was saying earlier. Deficiencies in verbal communication, nonverbal communication. In some of the papers I've read, basically what's going on is you've got a weakened intranetwork connectivity between the anterior and posterior default mode, and also between the medial prefrontal cortex and the PCC and precuneus. So between the front part of your default mode and the back part is weakened. And that processing is important, as we said earlier, in theory of mind, processing what other people are thinking. One scene from the show Atypical, he was getting older, So his mother allowed him to have, he had a job and he was making a lot of money, but his mother constantly put it into a savings account. And he decided once he was 18, I need to have control over my own money, but he didn't really understand it that well. And someone said, we're having a party this weekend. Can you pitch in for our party? And he said, is it important? Yes, it's important. Well, it's important, then I can give you $800. And the kid just totally took advantage of him because he's, oh yeah, that's very important. You should definitely give me that money. And he wrote the kid a check for $800 because he didn't have the ability to think, oh, this guy's tricking me. He isn't. He's just like, everything is logical. Everyone tells the truth in his world. So when this guy says this to him, he takes him at face value rather than thinking, oh, he's got a mind, and behind his mind, he's doing something dishonest to trick me. So they don't have that. Some of them don't have that ability, and that makes it really hard for them. Under connectivity within this salience network. So the insula to ACC connection is weak. So error checking between your emotional state, and so you've got weakened emotional cognitive connections, impaired social communication, difficulty connecting with emotional state to others. That's your empathy. So they lack empathy to a large extent. There was a podcast I listened to about magnetic, what is it called now? Transcranial magnetic TM something. But basically they put magnets on your head, and they can use those magnets to stimulate different parts of your brain to turn things on. And this one guy who was autistic, and he was really into music. He was really good at music, sound engineering. And his whole career was in music. And they turned this on, and suddenly he understood the words of the music because it was all emotional stuff, and he never really got it before. But once they turned on this, I guess it was default mode, so he can understand better, he was like, wow, this is what it's been about all the time. So they don't have that. They have difficulty connecting with other people's emotions. Impaired hub function, and the hub is your insula to ACC, which makes it difficult to switch between task positive and default mode. And you got over connectivity between default mode and task positive. So normally, as you get older, you separate your task positive and you get that anti-correlation. Younger people have less of that, but you get this cross connectivity that's inhibiting your anti-correlation. So here you're connecting between your dorsolateral prefrontal cortex and this over here, and you've weakened all of these other connections. So cognitive processing becomes a lot more difficult. And then last but not least, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. So I imagine there are a lot of people in the class who were at one point diagnosed with this, or maybe are still. And the symptoms here are difficulty maintaining focused attention. Focused attention is your task positive, right? Tend to be overactive, difficulty controlling their behavior, attention lapses, and the intrusion of self-referential thinking, default mode, during tasks. And the problem here is overconnectivity within the cingulate cortex. So remember, the posterior cingulate cortex is default mode, anterior is salience network. And as young kids are like this, by the time they're in kindergarten, they can just barely focus on one thing for a few minutes. Their minds are going everywhere, and it's really hard to get them to sit and focus. As you get older, you get a greater segregation between these halves, and you're more able to focus on a task for a long period of time. But when you don't have that, your self-referential thoughts are intruding in your ability to make to be in task positive and get things done. A weakened connection between the insula and the PCC. Salience network to task positive network is bad. So you've got a lack of anti-correlation between task positive and default mode. So you have a hard time staying on task because you've got these thoughts intruding when you want to focus. Weak connection between the anterior and posterior links of the default mode as well. And so basically, again, your conduction pathways here, your thought pathways are not operating maximally or well or whatever. So anyway, quick review: task positive network when you're working hard on something, default mode when you're just mind wandering, and the salience network deciding which of these you should actually be in. Any chats? Are the drugs made for these orders altering the weakened, strengthened connections, causing them? You know, when we get into stimulants, you know, if you have been diagnosed with ADD and you get Adderall's similar to mechanistically similar to like crystal meth or any amphetamine, and it helps to shift you into task positive mode. So stimulants which are stimulating norepinephrine release, the what do you call that? What do you call reticular activating system, right? Comes up to your brain, stimulates your whole brain with norepinephrine. Amphetamines will cause norepinephrine release, and that shifts you into task positive mode. Why is that? I don't really know, but that's why they give you those drugs for ADD. It helps you to stay in task positive mode. But why exactly they work, I don't think anyone really knows. They just know they do. So here's a nice little review thing. Here's a nice little review thing to kind of help you to process this yourself. So when you get into the exam, you'll understand it better. Okay, and I think that's about it. I'm not wrong. Yep. Okay, stop share. Stop sharing. You're oversharing, Slish. Okay, so that's 45 minutes. We still have a half an hour to kill. Are there any questions about the exam coming up? I always try and, usually the question is what should we study? I usually try and split it up equally between the 3 different chapters that we're doing. So hopefully, it's a struggle sometimes, but hopefully that's the way it's going to turn out.
I missed chapter 5 classes,
Okay.
and like I did really bad on the quiz. So
Mhm.
if you could you please explain feedback pathways of limbic system? Because
Okay.
that's really confusing.
Okay, let me pull the PowerPoint up real quick. And I see there's a question from Sean up on the chat. I'll take care of that after I do this. Oops. Addiction. Screen share. Addiction. Okay. So skipping ahead. Okay, so this is kind of the start of the feedback mechanism. So there's like the direct feedback mechanisms, and then there's the larger system that I'll talk about in a second. But basically, here's your limbic system, your VTA in your pons and your midbrain is sending axons up to these 5 areas and releasing dopamine. So here's your euphoria, your joy here in nucleus accumbens. So when you stimulate your nucleus accumbens to give you that joy, you're also stimulating these GABA neurons that are coming back and inhibiting the release of dopamine. So it's a feedback cycle right at the axonic area there. So you've got this axon inhibiting this axon. At the same time, this GABA, inhibitory GABA, is coming back and directly inhibiting the VTA, which is giving you less dopamine as well. And the VTA inhibits itself. So whenever you've got some VTA activity releasing dopamine, you activate these feedback mechanisms and bring yourself back down a little bit. And here are some other feedback mechanisms. Glutamate's excitatory. So when you're stimulating your PFC with dopamine, it's sending this back to stimulate this GABA inhibition, which is inhibiting dopamine. And same thing with these other areas. when you're stimulating them with dopamine, it's activating the stimulation of the GABA, which is inhibiting dopamine release. Okay. And then this is feed forward, basically. Your hypothalamus, through these endorphin neurons, are making more dopamine be released. And we'll talk about that more in the opiate section. And then here's the other big anti-reward system, which has to do with stress. So when you're stressed out, your amygdala, well, when you're too happy, your amygdala turns on this negative feedback system where it releases CRF in the RAS, which causes the release of norepinephrine in your prefrontal cortex, making you agitated and nervous. So instead of relaxed and happy, now you're agitated and nervous. And also releasing CRF to the hypothalamus, which is releasing, this is also CRF, by the way. You can call it CRF or CRH. I have to fix this someday, but it's the same hormone. So your amygdala then stimulates the hypothalamus to release CRH to the pituitary, which releases ACTH, which goes out into your bloodstream, goes to your adrenal cortex. Your adrenal cortex releases cortisol. So cortisol is a stress hormone. It's similar to like testosterone or progesterone, except its function is more about stress. So it gets your body ready for stressful situations so you can, deal with problems. But also it kind of dulls your prefrontal cortex. So you don't think as clearly when you're really stressed out. And I talk about later about relapse. When you're really stressed because say you've given up on your particular drug and you haven't taken it a long time, but you get really stressed, you stop thinking clearly, and then you end up relapsing. So do I pronounce your name right, Isun? How do you pronounce your name?
It's Isun.
Isun, okay. Did I answer your question, Isun?
Yep.
Okay, good. All right, let's go on to Sean Reasoner. So if you were interested in consciousness, would you want to study the default mode? Depends on what aspect of consciousness you're interested in, I guess. I think you might want to study them both to see how it switched. Well, I would want to study them both to see how things switch back and forth. Yeah, I'm not sure how to answer that question, but default mode would be one type of cognition you could study. Yeah, I'm not sure that was a good answer, but it's the best I can do. Any other questions here about the exam? Nothing? Tanner Tobias. Let's see your face, Tanner. He's sleeping. Damn it. Oh, there he is. Tanner, how's it going?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
I'm hanging in.
Feel that.
So here's one. Here's a question for you, Tanner. Can
All right,
you
I'll be ready.
do your best? What is it that makes a person relapse after they've given up a drug?
Is it the anti? Can I look at the textbook real quick? Did you just mention it?
Sure, go ahead. Who's the big Ravens guy? Oh, Tanner is. I see.
Yeah.
Is that a cricket team or hockey or?
Yeah, cricket. No, it's football. Is it the anti-reward system?
That might be part of it, but when
Relapse. All right, hold on.
Relapse.
Oh. Is it just like the prefrontal cortex getting like sense of the drug and then just wanting that drug, and once you're exposed to it, you just are addicted again?
Yeah, right. Because you got the neuroadaptations from when you were addicted. And then when you take that drug again, your prefrontal cortex gives you that craving, and then you end up taking it again and again and again. Once you get back into it, you're back into it. But I guess there are different ways to answer this relapse question. One way would be that, like, because of the addiction, you've got the neuroadaptations to make you more likely to relapse. And also, you could, from a different way of looking at it, was what makes you relapse? Hanging around with the people who used to do the drug with, seeing the paraphernalia that you used to use for the drug, or stress. Those are the things that really make you relapse. Okay, that's enough, Tyler. We've seen enough of you.
Thank you.
Esha Gupta asks, can you go over biological set point? Yes, I can. Yes, by God, I can. Let me share again. Share. Sharon is Karen. Okay, biological set point. We're talking down here. All right, hang on a sec. Okay, so basically, like, your hypothalamus is really important for set points. Set points of everything. Like your weight is controlled by your hypothalamus. Your thirst, your sex drive, all these kind of different set points, your body temperature is controlled by the hypothalamus. So the hypothalamus is also kind of controlling this, in that it's helping to stimulate your limbic system, and it's keeping you in a balance here, right? So when you feel excited about something, you come up, you're happy, it's going to bring you back down a little bit, right? And eventually the anti-reward will bring you once the stimulus goes away, you come back down. You're a little sad about something, you come down. After a while, that stimulus comes back, you come back up, but you're always somewhere around here. Things can make you happier or sadder, but you're always going to be around here, plus and minus of some kind of set point. So the idea then with addiction is you start to stimulate that anti-reward. Like this is normal, right? And then when you keep using that dopamine releasing drug, your ability to respond to that drug is decreasing. Your receptors are going away. You've got less dopamine, and also your anti-reward gets stronger. So your set point comes down a little bit because now the anti-reward is stronger than the reward. And then when you get into dependence, it's because your set point has come even lower. So now just to be normal, you need the drug because your reward system is so low that you need the drug to feel anything. And that's why when people give up, when they quit taking drugs, your reward system is so low, they get this anhedonia. They can't feel joy from normal human experiences because they've so burned out their happiness areas by overstimulating them that once you take that drug away, they really can't. Normal life isn't able to get you that stimulation. So that's anhedonia. So anyway, basically, here's your normal set point, and your reward system brings you up. Your anti-reward system brings you down. So if you take a drug that stimulates you, you're going to come up, and you get this rush of joy, and then your anti-reward kicks in, and it comes back down until you're kind of somewhere in the middle. And then when your drug wears off, that makes the reward go away, but the anti-reward is lagging behind. So you end up going into withdrawal, which is like the opposite of the high. Whatever the high was, this is the opposite. So that's your anti-reward bringing you down to the withdrawal period. And then you come back up to that normal, right? So everything that you take is going to take you away from normal, but eventually your body will bring it back to normal. So what happens with chronic use then is your normal drops, right? You've so, used up your happiness genes or your happiness pathways that they're down-regulated, and your anti-reward is more regulated, so your normal set point is now lower and lower. And with dependence here, you can see you take the drug, you get a little bit high, and then you just kind of normal. It's not really doing much for you. And then when the drug runs out, now you got to have it because you're feeling really bad. And that's why we'll get to opiates later, but that's why addicts will graduate from heroin to fentanyl to carfentanil, because it's more and more potent, and you can still get that rush. But anyway, Stop sharing. Stop sharing, Dr. Slish. Okay. Esha, did I answer that question okay for you? Are you
Yes. No, you did. Thank you.
Okay, good. Any other questions, comments, discussion points? Nothing? Okay. Big old exam coming up Wednesday, right? I have it set up. If you get extra time through SSS, send me an email to make sure I set it up right for you. I forgot someone last time. I don't want to do that again. So the exam will be Wednesday in normal class time. There's 2 parts like last time. You've got the multiple choice. You've got 15 minutes for. I think it's 10 questions, so 15 minutes should be plenty of time. And then you've got the essays where you've got 45 minutes to do them. So should be plenty of time. Remember when you're doing the essays, just pretend you're in class with me, and you're doing it in classroom. You don't have to do any internet searching. You don't have to, reference your answers or anything. Just, you should know this material going in and just explain it to me. It's open book. You can search the internet or look through your book or your notes or anything, but you really want to know it before you go in, because it is timed. You won't have all day to do that kind of stuff. And please, for the love of God, do not plagiarize. I'm not letting people get away with it anymore. So make sure it's all your own work and it's not copy and pasted from somewhere. Okay, no questions or comments? If that's all you've got, I'm going to let you go. I'm going. All right. I may be here on Wednesday to say hello before we start, but probably not. I'll probably just let you go. So the exam is at regular class time. That's right, Angelina. Okay, all done?